As you know, over the last couple of days, I've been going over the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case using sources such as out of the FOIA requests that have been sent out by End of the Weeds podcast, several others, and also Pt², who has the FOIA for the Facebook and for the messages that have been exchanged between her and Nicholas Godejohn. Her as in Gypsy Rose Blanchard. As of today, January 3rd, 2026, this is my first synopsis on the situation at hand, part 3 in the series. We were first introduced to Gypsy Rose Blanchard and Nicholas Godejohn on June 15th, 2015, after the Facebook posts were released and related to the murder of her mother, Claudinia Ann Blanchard. The story that followed was one of a nightmare. This case also brought forth the attention of the psychological disorder Munchausen's by proxy and its effects, insidious medication usage, forced public images of a dying child, perverse and premeditated doctor hopping, a child living on the verge of death by the hands of her own mother, shocking the nation, terrifying the world, and bringing a murdered woman straight to hell, a place that a lot of people thought that she deserved until now. We've all seen the documentaries and we've seen the interview, a frail woman who feared for her life that gripped us with her tale of torture, secrecy, and suffering, and a heroic tale of overthrowing your captors for freedom. Or so we thought. Gypsy's inconsistencies have been something that people have pointed out for years, even well before her release from prison. From the description of her living conditions to her mother's overbearing behavior. Despite the call-outs, there have been people that have stepped up to the plate to defend Gypsy Rose Blanchard. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. The conversation deepened after what's been referred to as the Gypsy files released. Holes in every single story, twists and turns that hardly anyone can keep up. These new documents, conflicting statements, and all-around premeditation suggest that we got it all wrong. And unfortunately, we've been relying on an unreliable witness to this situation the entire time. In Gypsy storytelling, we learned that her mother had been making her undergo several different medical procedures for absolutely no reason for her entire life. Teeth removal, salivary gland removal, trach, unreliable medical charting, doctor hopping, make-a-wish trip, paralysis, and the forceful use of a wheelchair, and over-medicating. Then this was backed up by a picture that was taken at the crime scene of a stockpile of medication in a pantry. There is, however, one diagnosis that Gypsy Rose has stood by since 2011, and that is a chromosomal deletion. When you look closer, taking away the story that we were told, this was never about Munchausen. This was never about torture, and this most definitely was not about a sadistic mother. This was a story about a mother who was trying to take the best care possible of her daughter while she was collapsing herself. Dee was in fact not perfect. You can see that in this case, that there was collusion for money, that she had taken advantage of some communities, but there's a few things that people aren't taking into consideration when it comes to Dee. Dee was a survivor of Katrina. She had her own trauma, she had her own problems, but she was also a single mother who had previously been, supposedly, allegedly, and speculatively, in an abusive relationship with Gypsy's father, Rod. Supposedly, allegedly, and speculatively, she had absolutely no help from Rod either after they had dispersed from each other. Nonetheless, Dee was still raising a very ill child who required way more attention than the average kid. Her surgeries can be explained if you look at her medical chart and you start to do some research about the chromosomal deletion. Dee even told doctors she's only had 2 seizures, while Gypsy was telling everyone that she had had hundreds, if not dozens, or multiple. And Gypsy claimed that all of these seizures were brought on by the forceful use of different medications to keep her subdued and to keep her tied to a wheelchair. But in recent text messages that Pt² has actually released, you can see that she's admitting that her mother knew that she didn't need the wheelchair, and she knew she didn't need the wheelchair, and she just used it when it benefited. We also have the diagnosis of paralysis, which now we know was total bullshit for both parts. Feigning the paralysis is one of the biggest things that Gypsy Rose had touched on in multiple interviews and has backed up several times, but has now been debunked because of these text messages. She said that it was forced upon her to use this wheelchair and be drugged beyond incapacitation for doctor's visits, for travel, and for other things. But this was done for money, praise, and attention, and Gypsy had played along with it and allowed it to happen so that they would have the money to be able to do what they wanted to do or to be able to survive. Remember, in some interviews, she says that she is fully aware of this. She contradicts and conflicts herself within the text messages and with other interviews. This situation is actually much starker, you see, because Gypsy Rose was actually in a motorcycle accident when she was little, and she was feigning the paralysis the entire time. She had even told her mother afterwards that she couldn't walk. She lied to her mother about this for over a decade. In her claim to counteract the videos where she's seductively dancing, trying to lure men into her grasp, "She makes me do it. I don't want to use the wheelchair, but she makes me. I love to dance. She tells me I have to, and when I don't want to, she lashes out violently and aggressively." Most concerning and the most damning of all of this to me are the alters of Gypsy Rose. Demona we're introduced to first, and she's the dark, seductive part of Gypsy.
She's evil, but she's also Gypsy's sister. I can kill anyone. I'm just not allowed to kill or hurt Dee Dee, Gypsy's mother, Gypsy, or Nick.
Not that she can't. She's not allowed. Candy is the vixen type. Little Kitty, a child. Yes, a child persona. That's used in sexual gratification for Gypsy and for Nick. Some would try to say that this is age play personification. And to that, I have to say bullshit. Because if this were the case, why would she have been claiming to Nick, her
Dark Master,
that he could have
their daughter when she comes of age? Of course, there'll be like a conversation. But of course, it'd be yours to take because you'd be the head of the household.
a plot to rape a child for sexual pleasure through participation for both parties? One of the team moms runs a podcast now. I'm so sorry I can't forget her name, but she already came online and she took accountability for the part of the interview where she actually talked to Gypsy about this particular situation. And Gypsy claimed that this was actually all Nick. It was all Nick's idea, and they had gotten into this huge argument and they had broke up shortly afterward. The woman that runs this podcast came out and she took full accountability for the situation in the interview, and she apologized to everyone because she was unaware of all the other things that were coming out. The persona of Little Kitty was built specifically for this intended purpose. There was no argument with Nick. It was her idea, and she had planted the idea in Nick's head. And I have to stress to you that Gypsy Rose Blanchard has a daughter of her own now. Apparently, they let these people have children. Vampires, dark masters, personas made up for their BDSM lifestyle, and sexually charged images that were posted to her Gypsy page that she of course blamed to her mother and other people on Dan and all these other people, saying that it was blackmail, and then turned around and looked at Nick and said that she had to cover for them. Just another way for Gypsy Rose Blanchard to manipulate Nick into thinking that it's his fault by saying that she had to cover up for what he had done and threw herself under the bus for him.
I had to, take the fall again for you.
One thing that I find very inconsistent is that when she names her personas and she's going into the personification, she tells you that they're for Nick's alters. But his alters don't have any names. They are just complementary factors towards her characters and her personas that she has made, and then she blames it on Nick by not elaborating any of the names. I mean, if you're making up the names for your characters, why doesn't he have the names for his characters? I can't play D&D unless I know your character's name. So how are you able to sit here and go through this fantasy without even knowing the name of the person that you have created the fantasy for? They all want to be wolves, and they all want to be vampires. They all want to be turned. They all want to drink blood. They all want to do nefarious acts. But you can't tell me which one was made for which personification of Nicholas Godejohn. Gypsy was clearly using these personas as a way of coercion and manipulation against Nicholas Godejohn. And she was using these to her favor in these factors because she eventually will use these personifications and these sexually charged images towards Nicholas Godejohn to convince him to go through with the murder of her mother. And the thing is she has the perfect alibi every single time.
I was forced.
And anytime Gypsy is asked to take accountability for anything, there is always this overarching element of surprise.
I was forced to do it, but I was abused. But there's no way that I could have said no.
She forces the weight of the situation onto other people's shoulders. She never takes accountability for anything. She's always put in these power dynamics that are just so unfair. She's always constantly consistency at the will or the lack thereof of someone else's fantasies and desires or needs. In reality, Gypsy had made the perfect reason. Gypsy was the writer of this story. She was the narrator of the story, the villain, and the protagonist. Moreover, the narrator. The more we uncover, the more we're able to see. These fantasies, desires, and rage were swirling under the surface of a chromosomally deficient, defiant child that was once known as Gypsy Rose Blanchard, otherwise known as Demona, otherwise known as Ruby, otherwise known as Little Kitty, otherwise known as Candy. Who is she now? Well, according to a new release, she is now Saint Gypsy, a woman who's devoting herself to faith, wanting to contribute more to her church, and being a missionary for the weak, the victimized, and the unheard. It's really quite the spectrum of insanity. A lot of people are correlating her newfound religious desires and her overall massive manipulation to that of Charles Manson. And in some way, this bears true. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was able to manipulate the masses. But this story of torture and survival for over a decade, I would know at one point I was a believer, so to speak. Having in-depth conversations about perfected victimhood and how that just isn't possible, especially for survivors of abuse. Now, don't forget, before I let you go, if you like content like this, go ahead and click all these buttons. Make sure you drop your comment down below. How do you feel about this so far and what we've uncovered? I hope you have a beautiful day. Please stay blessed, stay happy, stay safe, and stay full and please, for the love of God, remember not to shit your pants, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.